It's from Pat.
But we're on vacation. How did he know where to find us?
Dear Jake and Rachel, I hear the deal fell through and the network hired Chloe and Lily instead. If you chumps want to crawl back, I've sent over a keyboard and drum machine. Your friend, Patrick.
Ah, Matt! Where's the drum machine?
You're looking at the drum machine.
What's that? You're back? That's great news, Jake. I'll see you guys at the shoot tomorrow. Hey, Dad. Dad! Look, turns out we're not gonna need you after all. The old band is back, but thanks for coming in.
Oh.
Brought to you by ExpressVPN. Welcome to Live from Patrick's Parents' House, the show whose title is only half true. I'm your host, Patrick Willems, and every day I get one step closer to being completely consumed by my beard. It's out of control and quite simply cannot be stopped. Last week, we were thrilled to introduce an amazing new house band, Chloe and Lily Holgate. Unfortunately, they were too good for our little show and had already committed to gigs that actually paid money, so they will not be returning. So say hello to our new and old band, the Matt Brothers and Rachel Experience.
The Matt Brothers?
And Rachel Experience.
Why is Matt even here?
He needed something to do after Matt Wines ended. You know how he gets.
Yeah, Pat said it's my turn with the band.
Today, we have a very special episode. It's something that's never happened before on this channel. It's not an ordinary collaboration. It is, drumroll please, a crossover event, the thing that all comic book readers love.
Do they though? Aren't crossover events just these things that disrupt the ongoing stories?
Jake, just be grateful I gave you your old job back and stop undercutting my points.
I'm sorry.
Tonight's record-breaking episode is an installment in the One X-Cellent Scene crossover, in honor of what was supposed to be the release of New Mutants, a movie that may not actually exist. Nando V Movies organized many of the best channels in film YouTube to each talk about their favorite scene from the X-Men films. Now, when he asked, I knew exactly what I had to talk about. The introduction of everyone's favorite character, Vuk, in X-Men Dark Phoenix, a movie we all saw and remember fondly and talk about all the time. I'm just kidding, I'm not talking about Vuk. In fact, I'm not talking about a movie at all. See, in my constant need to be difficult and do things the hard way, I decided I didn't want to talk about any of the X-Men movies. Instead, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to discuss a subject I love dearly, that I just don't get to cover as much on this show as I'd like. Comic books.
Comic books? Ew.
Personally, I don't think the X-Men have ever lived up to their full potential in movie form. And in particular, they've never come close to matching the innovation and excitement of my personal favorite X-Men comic, Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's New X-Men. Today, I want to talk about a single page, the very first page of New X-Men number 114, which kicked off Morrison's revolutionary 4-year run on the series. But Patrick, can you really do a 20-minute video about a single page? Watch me. Guys, hit us with some music.
Let's play. Wolverine's my favorite.
Nice. In 2001, in a move designed to build off of the hype of the first X-Men movie, Marvel brought in Grant Morrison, the best writer ever, and Frank Quitely, the best artist ever, to revamp the X-Men comics. In their very first issue, they kicked off a period of radical change for the series. Instead of dwelling on the past, as the series had for so many years, they dragged it into the 21st century and pumped it full of new ideas, new characters, and a brand new aesthetic. But to really understand the significance of what Morrison and Quitely did and what that first page represents, we're gonna need some context. So here to provide that, returning to the show after 3 years is our special guest X-Men expert, Connor Goldsmith. Connor, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so can you explain what had been going on in the X-Men comics in the years leading up to Morrison coming in?
You know, if you look at the X-Men in the late 80s, Chris Claremont had essentially built them into the most profitable and popular IP in comic books. There was really no stopping it, and because it was so successful, under Claremont for 16 years, from 75 to 91, they basically decided it was too big to fail. So they kept introducing new titles. Eventually, they started realizing that crossover stories among all of the different X titles were enormously successful. It started with the Mutant Massacre in the mid-80s, and then, they sort of did one every year after that. And all of this sort of led up to the form that is most familiar to 90s kids because it's the team from the cartoon. It was a big initiative under editor-in-chief Bob Harris to relaunch X-Men entirely by adding a new title. Uncanny continued, but there was also just X-Men. And X-Men #1 is, I believe, still the best-selling comic book issue of all time. The thing that happened then, though, is that Claremont ran into issues with editorial. Claremont ended up leaving after only a few issues of the new run. So what happened after that was you suddenly had a whole mess of writers, some great, some whatever, writing a lot of different X books. And it had become such a juggernaut, no pun intended, of the industry that, again, it was sort of considered too big to fail. And this sort of culminated critically and in terms of audience response in the Age of Apocalypse storyline in 95. It was very 90s. It was very extreme, grim, oppressive, nihilism, but it was good. And they could never quite hit it again. In 1996, Marvel declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy because the comic book industry was sort of disintegrating underneath them. And then sort of every attempt after that to recapture the pre-Age of Apocalypse heights of, the 1991 run just didn't quite come together. No one was really that excited about Operation Zero Tolerance. It really is just kind of a classic tale almost of hubris, right? Because the Claremont machine was so powerful that it honestly, and I'm not saying this to discredit the other writers in the 90s, although it's not my favorite period of the X-Men. Certainly there are many very successful stories in that period. But I think that it was the apparatus that Claremont and Simonson had created was strong enough and had enough, story built into it sort of from the get-go that even after they weren't in control of it, it managed to go to sort of inertia sort of drove it on. By the turn of the century or the turn of the millennium, what they basically decided to do, because, why not try anything to stem the bleeding and sort of get the IP back to where it had been. The sort of solution that they came up with in editorial was they hired Chris Claremont. They went and found Chris Claremont. They said, "Do you want the X-Men back?" He said, "Obviously, yes." And they said, "This is the revolution. This is going to be the whole big thing." And they branded it as sort of this cross, like one of the big events. And every X title at the time suddenly became a revolution title. But nothing really happened particularly. And the fans just didn't respond to it. It was a total flop. I mean, the revolution books, can anyone remember the Neo? Once that juice was gone, there really was just nothing left in the tank. I can't think of a single X-Men story after 1996 that and before 2001 that particularly excites me.
Connor, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you here as always. Connor Goldsmith, everyone. In case you're not really familiar with superhero comics, here's how they work. Usually a creative team, comprised of a writer, artist, colorist, and letterer, will remain on a series for a period of time, after which they'll pass the baton to the next team, who will then steer the series in a new direction. Runs like Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, Al Ewing and Joe Bennett's Immortal Hulk, Ed Brubaker and Steve Epting's Captain America, or Giffen, DeMatteis, and Maguire's Justice League are so highly regarded because they found new ways to explore iconic characters. They changed the status quo, shifted the stories into new genres, and explored new ideas. But when it comes to superhero comics, you almost never see a series as big as X-Men get a change in direction as extreme as what Morrison and Quitely did. And it begins on that very first page. We're going to talk about that page in detail, but first, we're passing things over to everyone's favorite correspondent, Charl.
Really? You're keeping him around after the last time he acted up?
I don't know, he never tried to bail on the show and abandon his friend.
You guys got beef, huh? Oh, shit.
Charl's new segment blew the roof off the place last week, and I'm sure this one will do exactly the same. This is Charl in Charge. The insight and intelligence Charl brings week in and week out never ceases to stagger me. Wow. In cinema, the filmmaker has total control over what the audience experiences. They determine what we see and when we see it. But comics, while also a visual medium, work differently. The reader, reads them, so the writer, and more particularly the artist, have to guide the reader's eye through a page. The most obvious way to do this is with panels that we read from top left to bottom right. But how does it work with a splash page like this that is a single image? How are we meant to read this page, and what is this page saying? Let's parse it. As with any page in Western culture, we start at the top left. There we see a small but immediately recognizable image. Wolverine slashing away at something. Classic X-Men. Our eyes follow this path to the right, and it's clear that the object he's slashing is a decapitated Sentinel. A classic X-Men enemy, one of an endless army of mutant hunting robots, first introduced in X-Men number 14 in 1965. We follow the slope of the Sentinel's body down to the left, where we see its head sitting on the ground. Right in the center of its forehead, it's being hit with a bright red optic blast. We follow that optic blast over to the right and see it's coming from Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. Up to now, the page has been all classic X-Men tropes, but here, Cyclops isn't wearing his classic costume. Instead of blue spandex with yellow pouches, he's wearing a black leather uniform detailed with yellow X designs. Instead of a unitard, it's a jacket, pants, and combat boots. It's recognizably Cyclops, but with an entirely new aesthetic. Behind him, we can see the Sydney Opera House. The X-Men are in Australia, a place with deep ties to the series, where the team lived for 2 years during the 80s. And above Cyclops is the one line of dialogue on the page, "Wolverine, you can probably stop doing that now." It's a page dominated by classic X-Men iconography. It is exactly what readers were used to seeing in these stories for 40 years. And here, at the bottom corner of the page, is Cyclops, dressed in new, hyper-modern attire, announcing that it was time to stop that. When it comes to metatextual mission statements, it's hard to get much more overt than that. It's not subtle, but why the hell should a comic about superpowered mutants fighting robots be subtle? But there's one more important detail. At the very bottom of the page, hiding underneath the severed hand of the Sentinel, is a man we've never seen before, who has 3 faces on one head. He's clearly a mutant, but not a conventionally attractive one like Cyclops or Wolverine or most of the X-Men. This is a guy who could never pass for a human in public. This guy, nicknamed Ugly John later in the issue, is the kind of mutant Morrison would emphasize during this run. Characters like Beak or Zorn or Glob Herman, who look strange and different and can't hide their mutation and blend in with humanity. This opening scene is mirrored in the final page of the issue, as we see the new villain, Cassandra Nova, flanked by a squad of robot creatures. Their heads are recognizably the same as the Sentinels we saw on the first page, but the rest of them is brand new. Instead of the classic humanoid bodies, they now resemble a cross between insects and snakes. They're way creepier and way more threatening. This is a visual representation of Morrison and Quitely's mission statement. It's still X-Men, it still has the basic stuff you expect, but it's growing and changing into something new. It's evolving. Between the top of the first page and the bottom, we're witnessing the comic evolving, and this theme of evolution continues throughout the story. 2 issues later, the X-Men discover that within 4 generations, humans will die out and mutants will replace them as the dominant species on the planet. Several mutants, like Beast and Emma Frost, evolve further, experiencing secondary mutations. The villain of the story, Cassandra Nova, is a further step in evolution, beyond even mutants. Describing the comic in an interview leading up to its release, Morrison said, "It's a book about the future, about evolution, about replacing the outmoded with the fresh." For decades, X-Men had functioned as a superhero comic about an oppressed group of people who were hated and feared by the majority of human society. And this never really changed until Morrison took over. Morrison gave mutants their own subculture. There were mutant celebrities, a mutant neighborhood in New York City, like their own Chinatown. Ever since Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created them in the 60s, mutants were always presented as a metaphor for oppressed minorities. But now they finally had their own culture in the way there is black culture or gay culture. And a major part of Morrison's run was the ways humanity tried to appropriate mutant culture. He evolved the series from a superhero book to a high-concept science fiction book. And man, just talking about these comic books is getting me so hyped up. So let's have another song.
Let's hit it, my band. I thought you said you were gonna play drums.
You get what you get and you don't get upset, okay? Jesus Christ. Come on.
Ah!
Since Matt Wines finally concluded last week, we had an opening for a new segment. So I decided to turn things over to our summer intern, Emma Logsdon. I said, "Hey Emma, do whatever you want." And so here is our brand new segment, Lockdown, in which Emma tells me why I should watch the 2013 movie Lock, starring Tom Hardy.
Thanks, Patrick. As everyone knows, Locke is a critically acclaimed indie drama in which a man named Ivan Locke drives for 90 minutes. Coincidentally, after I lent my DVD copy of Locke to you last summer, it rode unwatched in your backpack for 3 weeks. Because you haven't watched Locke in the year since then, here's why I still think you should. Locke is a single location film with only one person on screen, but it has a fantastic voice cast. Also, quarantine is the perfect time to watch somebody sit in one place and make phone calls while his life falls apart. That's just 2 of hundreds of reasons why you should watch Locke. And if I get to do another lockdown, you better believe I'll be telling you more of them. Back to you, Patrick.
She makes a good case. Will I watch Locke after this video is done? It's possible. In fall 2000, Morrison wrote a 10-page pitch for the series entitled Morrison Manifesto, in which he laid out his thoughts on what needed to be done to make it relevant in the 21st century. It's collected in the Omnibus. Here is the second paragraph. In the last decade or so, the tendency at Marvel has been intensely conservative. Comics like the X-Men have gone from freewheeling, overdriven pop to cautious, dodgy retro. What was dynamic becomes static. Dead characters always return, nothing that happens really matters ultimately. The stage is never cleared for new creations to develop and grow. The comic has turned inwards and gone septic like a toenail. The only people reading are fanboys who don't count. Then here's another relevant part a bit further on. We have to stop talking to the shrinking fan audience and re-engage the attention of the mainstream. Longtime fans will read the book and bitch about it no matter what. We don't need to attract them. We need to make the book accessible to the real-world audience. What Morrison is talking about is something that constantly happens in superhero comics. And not just superhero comics, but ongoing stories in any media that continue over several decades. Instead of refreshing and updating stories to attract new, younger audiences, the publishers and studios will target the 40-year-old fans who have been following the story since they were kids. The first page of New X-Men is like Luke Skywalker throwing away the lightsaber in The Last Jedi. It's the moment an ongoing story announces that it's not just going to rehash the same greatest hits we've seen before. It's going to move forward.
Pat, you promised you were not going to talk about that movie again. You probably got like 100 dislikes just from that one mention.
Shit, you're right. Curse my great analogies. Whatever, Star Wars or no Star Wars, the point stands. There was no social media in 2001, no Twitter hashtags or change.org petitions, so I wasn't aware of any campaigns to get Morrison fired from the comic and to have his issues wiped from canon. Knowing how nerds are, I'm pretty sure a whole lot of people were pissed off by the new uniforms or the revelation that Professor X tried to kill his twin sister in the womb. But I just wasn't aware of it. These stories are designed to continue on forever. But the only way that's possible is if they evolve. The model that's generally used is to periodically do a back-to-basics reset, to bring everything back to how fans remember it and make it feel just like it used to. But looking to the past is only a temporary solution. It's not a path forward.
Pat, you're doing it again.
Oh, god damn it! But look, what I'm saying could be applied to countless franchises. The X-Men movies seemed to have an opportunity to refresh the series when they made First Class. But then they brought back the original director and the original cast, and soon the series was back to being the same boring mess they had tried to get out of. With superhero movies, when a series seems to be getting stale, the solution is almost always to reboot and start from scratch with a darker take on the character. Ooh. The closest to pulling a Morrison any series has done is Thor Ragnarok, which casually killed off much of the original supporting cast and pivoted the series into a more freewheeling comedic tone. And it was a big success. Some other series, like Doctor Who and Star Trek, are designed to periodically evolve and refresh, and that has sustained them for over 50 years. Morrison left X-Men and Marvel entirely in 2004, after a falling out with publisher Bill Jemas, and the company proceeded to reverse almost all the progressive ideas he had introduced. Over the next 15 years, while there were some bright spots like Joss Whedon and John Cassidy's Astonishing X-Men, or Jason Aaron's Wolverine and the X-Men, the mutant side of Marvel never felt as vital and exciting as it did during the Morrison era. It slid back into the same irrelevance it had been in before he started. And then last year, it was revitalized once again. Writer Jonathan Hickman did a total overhaul of everything X-Men. Not only did he make X-Men a top-selling series again, but he made people excited about it. He made me excited about it for the first time in years. And not by doing a back-to-basics return to nostalgia. He did it by moving forward, by evolving, by introducing a new idea of what this story could be. Evolution isn't always easy or comfortable, but it's a fact of life. And it's a fact of X-Men. So look, for whoever ends up making the Marvel Studios X-Men movie reboot, you might as well embrace it. All right, we did it. Crossover episode complete. We finished on time. Now let's close this out with one more song.
chill.
I'm done.
Dude, it's all gravy.
Jake, where are you? Whatever, he'll be back. So that does it for this week. Matt, you can mail yourself back to the apartment now. Thank you for the assist today.
Dude, cheers, man. Yeah. You know, I think it's about time to reward myself with a little friggin' grape juice.
Nice. Now go check out the rest of the One X-Cellent Scene videos. There are videos by channels like Nando v Movies, Lessons from the Screenplay, and Cinema Wins. And if you want to make your own and join in the fun, go for it. Just send the video over to Nando and he'll add it to the playlist. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go read some comic books. Nando v Movies organized many of the best channels in film YouTube.
Hey, what's up?
How the hell did you get a hold of Patrick? I've been trying to reach that dude for months and all I get is his voicemail.
Oh, I sent a letter to Charl, and he set it up.
Charl? Wait, the coconut? Did you know about this?
Yeah, he's a client.
Patrick?
Charl.
The coconut. The coconut is your client. The coconut has a lawyer and an email address.
It's a P.O. box.
Sure, that makes sense. Can I get the address?
It would be highly unethical for me to reveal the confidential information of a client. Sure.
Since this is an X-Men video that's part of the One X-Cellent Scene crossover, it's obviously time to tell you about ExpressVPN. To be clear, it's not spelled X-, it's just spelled express like the regular word. Maybe this whole X pun idea was a mistake. Since so many of us are still stuck at home avoiding the outside world, we've probably spent a lot of time in front of our TVs and computers watching everything Netflix has to offer. I know in the past 4 months, I have watched nearly as many movies as I watched in all of 2019. So maybe you want some new options, and that is where ExpressVPN comes in. It's a service that keeps your internet usage secure and private, so your passwords aren't hacked and your data isn't sold to ad companies. But the part that I really like is that it allows you to digitally change your location so you can access streaming libraries available in different countries. For example, Netflix in the US does not have the whole Studio Ghibli film library, but Netflix in Canada does. So just change your location in ExpressVPN and you can watch Kiki's Delivery Service.
And after last week's Nolan video, if you want to watch Dunkirk, just switch your location over to France.
You can get 3 months of ExpressVPN for free just by clicking the link down there in the description or by going to expressvpn.com/Patrick Willems. So if you need some new things to watch for your next few months of sitting inside your home, the solution has arrived.
I haven't been in the band. I'll count it in. I'll count it in, okay?
Let's hit it, band.
Jesus, I thought you said you were gonna play drums. Shut up.
Oh, that's it.
I hate that tiny guitar.
It's an ukulele. So I respectfully ask that you call it such.
Really? You're still keeping them around? Keeping them around? I can't talk. I don't want to say any of these fucking fun.
You gonna cry? I can't talk.
Oh my god, I hate that tiny guitar.
It's a ukulele!
Shut up!
You get what you get and you don't get upset.
Ooh.
And you're getting upset. And but you're not just getting it that I'm in the band now. And I'm playing the... Mom! Mom, get out here! We're doing YouTube! But like, what is that though? Is that candy? But like, what is it though?
Is it a snack for us?
She got trolley gummies! Yay!